Automated market makers are some of the most economically important instruments on blockchains, and that's why they're really attractive to founders who want to build big protocols. Uniswap v4 creates a platform for AMM developers with a simple promise: build a smart contract and get order flow. The fastest AMM, I think, to hit $100 million in TVL will likely be a Uniswap v4 hook. And here's what that could look like. In this video, I'll discuss the three types of hooks that I think can contend. I think there are migration-friendly hooks, capital efficiency hooks, and then new liquidity hooks. And we'll break down each type. But before we start, we may want to look at what's really required in building a hook. Well, if you're a hook developer, you need to start by writing a smart contract, which is going to be your hook. Then you'll need to figure out a way to attract liquidity providers. This is something that every AMM has to do. It's unlikely that at launch there will be a nice way for hook developers to just automatically find liquidity providers, especially given that hooks could introduce bugs, right? Hooks need to be audited and so on. So it will be the responsibility of hook developers to find their own LPs. Thirdly, you then need to just spin up pools and receive order flow from the system, and this is where it gets really attractive, right? And when you develop your own AMM, you not only need to find new liquidity providers, you need to also convince routers and aggregators and searchers and other participants in the ecosystem to basically give you order flow and to send swaps your way. And especially now that's getting more difficult than ever. Aggregator fatigue is very strong. As they have to integrate so many protocols across so many chains, they get inquiries daily. And so it's becoming harder and harder to reliably get order flow. And I think Uniswap v4 is the perfect solution. Just build a hook and the order flows will come. Okay, so how do we build these three different types of hooks? Well, the first one is a migration hook. So this blog post by Kirok is really interesting, and it really studied how liquidity migrated from V2 to V3. It also looked back at how liquidity migrated from V1 to V2. And the conclusion that I get from this is that migrations happen really quickly. ETHUSDT migrated within 4 months, where V3 actually flipped V2 liquidity. And then if we look at other pairs like ETHUSDC, it happened even quicker. It happened within like a month. So who knows how quickly that's going to happen for V4. But this was a very similar picture going from V1 to V2. And likely that I think providing a hook that'll become the kind of default hook for people to migrate to, both from V3 but also from V2, I think will be really interesting. Why would people jump over from V2 to V4? Well, V2 and V3 were very different, right? V2 was this passive vehicle that you could just deposit into and deploys liquidity at the full range. V3 was a tick-based system where users had to choose, what ranges they have to provide liquidity in. V4 is also going to be a tick-based system. So, however, it's going to have the capacity, through building hooks to potentially build full range hooks and other types of hooks that may be more interesting to V2 developers than the V3 offering was, right? So I do think we may see actually migration both from V2 and V3. The second type are capital efficiency hooks. And the interesting kind of reference point here is Arrakis. When Uniswap v3 first started, there were LPs that really find it complex to decide what ranges they should provide liquidity on, to manage against impermanent loss, to make sure that they're providing liquidity where swaps are actually happening so that they can get fees. And Arrakis, which was previously called Uni, built by the Gelato team, was an automated liquidity management solution. And what that promised to do was basically you just deposit liquidity like it was a V2 pool, and then Arrakis would, using their off-chain algorithms, figure out automatically how to reallocate that liquidity. I think they really became successful because of this concept, providing something new and efficient to liquidity providers. And so, right now they're nearly at 200 million TVL, and we are, far away from the bull market peaks here. So I think similar concepts can be applied. If you take an existing liquidity provider persona that's currently, happily providing liquidity to V2 and V3, and you really analyze, where can you make them more efficient? Where can you improve on the fees they're getting or potentially limit their risks? Really just providing better capital efficiency overall for the liquidity provider. I think you can then use that to really migrate a lot of TVL. And of course, companies like Arrakis are going to be in an excellent position because they already have the liquidity provider relationships. They just need to offer better products that are built on V4, and they can move people over. But I wouldn't sleep on new entrants either. There's so much space for new concepts that there actually may be an advantage to just thinking from scratch here. And the third type I want to talk about is new liquidity hooks. So these are potentially the most interesting ones. These are entire new protocols with new types of roles that insert liquidity into the system that previously would not have been AMM liquidity, right? So one example is building a lending protocol on Uniswap v4. Another could be building an options protocol on Uniswap v4. And the idea is like in a lending protocol, lending protocols are very sensitive to price changes, right? When prices move in a certain range, that could trigger liquidations. And traditionally, these liquidations had to happen off-chain through keepers or liquidators who basically monitor positions, and when they're insolvent, they liquidate them and get a hefty fee. Uniswap v4 can improve that because Uniswap v4 gives you a callback when price changes, right? And so you could build a lending protocol that automatically liquidates positions when price moves out of the safe range. And if we look at the size of Aave, for example, $8 billion of liquidity across many, many networks and markets, and we build a V4 hook that takes even a chunk of that, that could be very significant because that's liquidity that previously was not LP liquidity, that was previously doing something else in a completely different part of DeFi that would now move into the Uniswap ecosystem. And similar, the same thing is true for options, and there's probably other ideas that are interesting to explore here, but lending is obviously a very big one. Yeah, I think these three are effectively really the most interesting ways in my mind to get TVL very quickly with the new Uniswap v4 hook, but by no means are the complete design space. So let me know in the comments if you think there's other hooks that could also be really interesting from a TVL perspective, and perhaps other hooks you just like from a research angle, because there are really interesting mechanism designs out there. I'm definitely particularly interested about this third category, and so if you want a specific example of how that works from a major crypto player who's building a lending type hook, then check out this video I made as well. And don't forget to subscribe, and you can also follow me on Twitter, where I talk about crypto from a product perspective.